site so that we could access them. Eventually, this is something that we will be doing ourselves. But tonight's main focus is showing everybody how to do a game sheet and get everybody starting to go electronically.
The last thing I just for the sake of demonstration purposes, because we have the Okanagan Mainline Amateur Hockey Association online right now, is just sort of show what the data does. So before we get to any other questions, and we'll definitely open it up to any questions, just to give you a bit of a visual of what we're actually populating. So for example, we're on a schedule page, which VIAHA will have their own version of this schedule page once everything goes live for electronic game sheet use, where you have the ability to choose the division, the tier, and again, it may be named something different here, but you have all your parameters to choose what schedule we're looking at. And then if you find the particular game, if we were looking at this 8-8 game, 8-8 score game on December 1st, there's a new function where we've had the ability to call up the game, and that's basically a summary of the game. It's not the physical game sheet per se, which everyone is emailed, but if you need a quick reference or an official needs a quick reference or something, there is that ability to call up that particular game. Also from a scheduling standpoint, you can choose the individual team and you'll be able to go to that team's schedule, see their upcoming games, or expand that to see more, which will include past games that team's participated in and all future games as well. And any game, again, that's already complete, you'll have the ability to call up that data. And this all gets populated with the conclusion of that game sheet when we hit end game. So just so you have an idea of where this data is going beyond just having a physical, or I guess an electronic PDF version linked to you at the end of the game as far as the game sheet summary. This is it's also populating all these components. So I think there was one more question that came in.
The question was about exhibition games. At this time, we've only put on placement games as we were learning the system. All league games are on for the carded teams. The playoff games will be on, and we will start working on eventually exhibition games. This is our first year doing it, so we have to go slowly. We can't just flood everything on there because we aren't ready for it and you aren't ready for it. So it will happen eventually, but not at the moment.
Yeah, and I think a discussion that that Ann and I had previously is getting these league functions. It's more to get everybody familiar with the platforms. How to interact with the team management component, how to deal with the pregame, how to deal with the in-game use of the game sheet from the standpoint that with the league, we're dealing with a majority of gameplay. The next phase will be to introduce everybody to individual competitions, whether that's an exhibition schedule, tournament type schedule. There will be further training and administrative training on how we can create those. But as Ann mentioned, with High Sport and through herself and Dave, a good majority of gameplay is in regards to league play, and where we'll be going with the playoffs are all inputted here, so everyone's going to be able to get familiar with it.
So we have another question. When does the data need to be uploaded by? I'm assuming this is for an individual game. It needs to be uploaded. You can upload most of it prior to even heading to the rink. And then once you get to the rink, you can fill in who the officials are going to be and potentially make any changes there. As one player doesn't arrive or somebody arrives without their jersey and has to have a borrowed one. So it can be done a day ahead, 2 days ahead, whenever it's convenient for you.
Yeah, so again, with these 3 steps that we covered, and we'll give everybody an opportunity to work through this, and like Tommy said, in this staging platform that everybody's been set up for today, you can sort of play around with it. It's not going to affect any of the live stuff. We don't want anybody going into the production mode and editing anything there. at this time, but in this staging platform, you have the ability to test things out. So in the manage team roster component, the first part that we covered, that's your default settings. Those are your settings you want to set as your permanents, although you can go in and edit them. What you set up in that team management component, position, player number, and so on, will be what your signed lineup sets to every time. Then on the game-to-game basis, you'll have to have that data connection in order to access your individual game. But you'll do this night before or even day of game before you go to the rink. You'll set up who's coming to the game and all of that. That would not include the officials. It would likely not include the timekeepers yet at that time. You may not have that appointed yet. And then the scorekeeper component is what we're doing live in the rink. So we go into that aspect. That's where you enter your game number, the home team HCR ID, and you basically go into the window that the signed game lineup was in, but you can actually add the officials because you're in the arena. You add the timekeepers. You make any last-minute changes that might have occurred, and then you're live. After the game, literally, when you hit end game, as soon as the device you're on is back connected to either data or Wi-Fi of some kind, it'll push that data forward. I don't know if Tommy's here or not, if he has a better way
I think
of explaining that.
Once you hit the end game, you cannot go back in
Right.
and change any of the data. So everything has to be entered before you end that game, because otherwise you may be changing data that a referee has already signed off on, and you can't do that.
Was Tommy still on there?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I kicked out. Yeah. So for being offline, yeah, just make sure that you have everything done beforehand, before you go offline, and have everything set, because like if a lineup comes in the last seconds, that might have a conflict there. So always make sure that you're always in sync there. And after the game, try to get connected to Wi-Fi as soon as possible, especially in case you have a reportable penalty there, so that the report gets sent out as soon as possible. So yeah.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah, because we do understand that in the arena or in the scorekeeper box, we will have limited access in some facilities. Again, if you're connected the entire time, not an issue. But after the game, as soon as you have the capability of getting back within range of either Wi-Fi or data, then when you hit end game there, it will upload that data. Nanaimo has a question about tournaments in January. I think the primary focus here would be to launch this in this league play setting, and we'll be able to probably gauge a second phase of individual competitions. That might be a discussion to have once we get through this first step on feasibility of getting that in place. The function is there. It's just a matter of the right function, or sorry, the right process to make sure we can get all those individual competition data created.
Another question.
Nanaimo, if you have the schedule and you get it to me, we can make sure we get it on the get it loaded on the platform.
The other question here, if you're disconnected. So yeah, when the game has started, so once you've hit the start game function, anything you're doing within that game sheet, whether you're connected or not, is basically it's in a storage mode type of thing where that data can be entered in offline, and it will collect in there. And then whenever you do get that connection back, you have the capability of putting everything in. So all of the game data that we entered in the demo here could have been entered while we were offline, because we're actually in the platform of the game sheet itself. So we don't need the connectivity because those are all internal to within that game sheet. And it's not until we need to push that data back to the main database or mainframe of the game schedule and statistics where we need that reconnectivity.
Does that answer your question? I'm not 100% sure if that's what we were asking or not, but
yeah, I'm not 100%. That's how I read that one. I don't know if there's other questions
Yeah,
as well.
I'm thinking that you mean that if you're in the score box and you start out with a Wi-Fi capability and you lose it, do you lose anything? Once you get into that game, and once you've entered the game, you do not need to have internet connection, so you can do the entire game offline.
Yeah,
And
and what might happen is you might start like your Wi-Fi might be terrible. You might be shaky Wi-Fi or something, right? You might have it on and off. That's perfectly fine. The app is built to be resilient, and if it can't get a connection, it'll just stay queued on your device, and next time it has a connection, then it'll re-upload everything that's been queued.
yeah, Bobby says, what if you get logged off mid-game? You don't have to be logged on after the game starts
Right.
because you've got the screen in front of you. So you're
You
not
just log back in. Yep.
you're not logging off or logging in. You're already there. You're
Logging
working
off would
with
have
the
to be
screen that's in
intentional.
front of you.
You can resume where you left off. It will be saved on there. Everything's persisted to the device.
Yeah. So with that question, I think you just answered it, Tom. But say, let's say the battery dies and they plug it back in and it reboots up. As long as they go back into the game there, it'll have the latest data, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I was hoping at this point we could ask everybody to log in to the game that they were game and game number, and we'll let them go through a small portion of the game if that's possible.
Yeah. So do you want to go right into the scorekeeping phase, or did you want them to go through the sign in? Because no, they have to because they're doing game number, right?
They're doing game number. I think they've seen the process.
Yeah.
And I think what they're probably wanting to do is actually do a game sheet.
Yeah.
So let's do a small game sheet, and then we can answer more questions.
Okay. So if everybody wants to, I'm going to throw into the chat function here, just in case somebody doesn't have it handy. Just bear with me. I'm going to send you the link to this staging platform. I'm going to put it into the chat function. So you should be able to even link right out of, or copy and paste it or link right out of the chat, the chat window. And that'll take you to the page that you see on screen now. And what that'll do is give you the ability to enter the game, and we'll be able to go right into scorekeeping. Anne distributed previously a game number and HCR number, right?
I did. I gave everybody a game number and an HCR number to log into, and this would be for the people who are going to be the leads for their association, all those people that were identified. If there are any managers or coaches listening in that want to go through a game sheet themselves, then they would have their app login that they registered on, which was the highsport.app. And they would be able to pick a placement game that was a home game for them and go into that and do it simultaneously. We'll be all be entering the same data, so you don't have to think that you need to have an old game sheet in front of you.
So again, if everybody's been able to either follow that link or input this destination, you'll land on this page as you see on screen, and you'll want to choose the scorekeeper tab at the top of the queue. That'll take you to this page, and that's where the game number can be entered.
So we'll take a different game number that's blank.
So everybody will have their an individual game number that Anne's distributed to them, and a corresponding home team HCR ID. And with those two pieces of information, you'll be able to log in. You'll likely have a different team, I assume, right?
Yes.
Than what we've got. So you'll have your own team. So we'll let everybody sort of do that login process. We'll give you a couple of minutes if you wanted to try and follow along here, or you can just re-watch the demo again. Just as an update, we finally got the recording working. So the first half of what we demonstrated was not recorded, but we are recording this version. So we'll be able to at least share this recording for anybody who needs to reference again these steps. We've got feedback that one of the games has been completed.
That's because of the start time, but nothing's been entered on it.
Okay, so so you may, if you are getting a notice that the game has been completed, yeah, what Anne is referring to is that the start time might be post 8 o'clock p.m. on today's date, but it doesn't mean that the information has been added yet. So you should be able to still access the ability to put in this information. So if you're on this screen, again, we'll do a bit of a demo on our screen, but go ahead with your own devices or platforms. Go through the process of choosing a team.
So in Greg's case, someone already completed his game. They were following along and.
Somebody already did his game.
Oh, okay. Wow. Good for you. You're well ahead of us here.
Except he was probably trying to do his own, maybe, and somebody went in and entered his. I don't know. Not sure what the exact scenario is with that, but within your own test or your own platforms here, again, it may not be exactly as we have on screen because we're dealing with different teams, but if you're ahead of us already, then that's good. But we're going to go through the process of selecting our team players that we're going to play today. We know that there's 18 forwards and 3 goalies on this team, which is too many, so we need to take away 1 forward. We need to take away 1 goalie, and then we've reached our correct amount. If we had too many, it'll tell us that we need to stop and start again. We'll take away our goalie, and then we pick our starting goalie. And then again, if you're doing this live, if you're doing this, yeah, but prior to the game, we're in the live setting right now, but if you're doing this prior to the game, you're only doing your team, and then you can sign off on it, and then it'll be ready for you when you arrive at the rink. So again, you're not really filling in the other teams, but for the sake of the demonstration, we'll show you what the other team would be doing as well. And again, if you're just going through your own processes, continue to fill in your sample games.
I should point out that for other teams, the team officials, they go straight into their own lineup. They don't see the other teams' lineup.
Yeah, take out all the zeros.
And then I need to take away a goalie. There we go. Oh, we good. Start the backup in this one. That's fine.
Also, that message that pops up because there's jerseys with zeros on them.
Yeah.
For this particular account, you can skip that, but for actual coaches and any other team official, they can't skip that. They have to go back and click edit and make sure that their jersey
and
number
make sure everybody's documented with a number, right?
Yeah.
All right. And everybody, if you're at the official stage, you can use my name. If you're just at drawing a blank as to what the referee's name is, and just typing in jerk won't find the referee, unfortunately, because everybody will pop up probably.
I can fix that.
But is that how it's set up, Tommy? As default, you just type in jerk and it lists 4,000 referees?
I can try to make that happen tomorrow, yeah.
Okay. But for the purpose of the demo here that you guys are going through, if you just want to put my name in as the official, that'll allow us to continue. You don't have to fill in any other officials. And again, when you've got your 4 checkpoints, then we're ready to go into the game. I'm sure some of you have already started to go into the game, but we'll sort of stay on this phase for about a minute. If there's any questions anybody has during this phase, let us know now so we can address those. And if not, like I said, we'll proceed right into the game, and then we'll work on entering some data. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat function. So I'm going to go into the start game phase.
Oh, before we continue, I should just point out.
Oh yeah.
The recent addition here, underneath the team name, you can see how it says 19 players and 4 bench staff on the home app. This
Yeah.
is just for the referee reviewing the game before you start the game, so they can see quickly, okay, this lineup matches up. And then
No, and
still click on there and see details.
that's a really good point for that Tommy brings up. The official doesn't have to like click into the team information and then count them up or look for the tally. Like he said, it shows it right there, so they know the situation. Okay, so we'll go into the start game now. As a parent of a referee, can we check to see if our child is in the system? Sure. If you want to type in a name other than mine, you can go for it. Trust me, you don't want me reffing your game anyways, probably. Okay, so again, I think most people are at least seem to be close to the game official section. So we are going to open up the start of this game. We can always enter back into that pregame stage again if somebody needs us to do so. I'm just going to check through that chat function one more time, make sure I didn't miss a question. But it looks like that was the last question. Yep. So in the game function, I'll give this about a minute for people to get to this stage, and then we'll put in our first data. Again, if you're having any trouble, just let us know getting to this step. While we're waiting for this next step, I will make one comment to the officials within the system. We have an upload, so basically what happens is it pulls again from the HCR reports. So because we're currently in December, it's got information of officials that were certified during the 2017-18 season, because that certification goes until December 31st, 2018. It also has, there's a report of the officials that have currently been certifying, because we may have some overlap. We may have some officials that certified last year and hadn't gone to their clinic yet, potentially, or we have brand new officials that wouldn't have been on last year's system. So we do have sort of 2 operating systems going on with officials in regards to who's in place. So that should verify that we are that officials that are currently active and in proper standing are searchable within the system. When we hit January 1st, we'll then eliminate officials that didn't go through the recertification process for the current season. Those officials will be vetted out of the system, and then from January on to the end of the season, just those officials that certified during the 2018-19 or the current season will then be in the database. So there is a component to the officials within the database on verifying whether they're supposed to be active or not.
Also, I should mention that staging isn't actually current with the official database right now. Only production.
That's fair. So there is a possibility that you're searching for an official that might not exist in the staging phase, but in the live setting, that's the mechanism in place. So we'll go into entering data. I think that I stalled enough time for everybody to get here. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll do the goal scenarios. So we'll add a goal. We've got number 7. Who will score. Hopefully there's a 7 on this team. It looks like there is. 7, assisted by number 9, who is not on this team, so we're going to go with number 10. And again, you can add a secondary assist. You can eliminate it if you've entered it accidentally. You can change the order if you need to make a correction, or you've accidentally clicked the wrong player or anything as we're going live. Again, if it is only 1 assist, it notes at the bottom that there was only 1 as a checkpoint. It says there's no assists if you haven't checked them yet. And then if you've got 1 goal scorer and 2 assists, you can't add a 3rd assist because it's not allowed. So it says you're all done and you move on to the next stage. Then the time of the game, the drop down to choose the period. It'll default to the first period at the stage of the game we're at. 12:45. Is our time period, and that goal is being scored even strength. It does again give a summary. Goal scored by number 4, assisted by 5 and 6. And we save that and it enters our queue. So we've entered our first goal. So we'll allow people to add add a goal, and we'll prep everybody to go into the next function, which will be adding a penalty.
Also, I might add, you cannot add players to your roster. If you've added somebody to your roster on a Friday night, and your registrar hasn't gotten them onto the HCR, onto your team, they can't play unless they're listed on that game sheet. The high sport refreshes on a continual basis, so you have to make sure if you're adding players still to your team, if you're carding them, if you've still got cards left, that it has to be into the HCR, and so that it can be uploaded by a high sport before you play. You can't 15 minutes before a game quickly call up your registrar and say, add so-and-so, we've still got cards left, because it just won't happen.
The sync is every hour.
Yeah, so it is quite frequent, and that's come a long way from our original pilot last year. So it is as up to date as you could expect, but as Anne said,
if you don't go through the process of getting your registrar to do it, that child is not going to play in that game.
So we're going to move into adding a penalty, just like we did in the previous demo. Everyone will have an opportunity to add a penalty. We're going to add a minor penalty to a player. And again, it defaults that the penalty is assessed to number 10 and that they are going to be the one that serves it, which in this initial example we will do. And we'll move on to the next screen. We're just going to have a minor penalty. So minor penalty charging, and again, it only allows you to choose those penalties that are associated to that rule. And if you again chose a major penalty, you would automatically add that game misconduct, but in this case it is a minor. And we will move on to the next phase where we identify the time that it occurred, 10:11, of the first period. And it is the same start time. There's no other penalties that affect when this penalty is going to start. So we save that, and that is again in the game summary queue. From here, we will go to another penalty. We'll add that to the away team, and the infraction we'll give to a player here, served by the same player, and this is the double minor example. Again, just to try and, as people start entering this, just to put this into real-time examples, you'll often have the referee come and report the penalty, and they'll tell you the player number first, and then they'll give you a signal. So that's why it's designed in this manner. It's sort of in the same progressive manner that you would receive the information on the ice. So they'll tell you number 16 away. Often you'll see the player being escorted to the box, so you'll have that information in advance. The last piece of information you'll get is what penalty it is. In this case, it's that slew foot trip. And again, if we choose tripping, but it's not that double minor option, we know that we have to go to the correct one. The tripping double minor, they will inform you of how long the penalty is after they've identified what the penalty is. So again, this is a very intuitive process, and it's chronological to how you'll receive the information. And then the last thing is what you're doing, which is putting up the time of the game, and that we'll put as it occurs post the other events thus far, 7:09, and no reason to have that start at a different time. So then now that we've got some situations in the queue, we'll go back to this penalty here, the first one that we entered. It would have ended at 8:11. If we're well past that time in the game, we know that it ended at a natural time. It wasn't affected by the scoring of a goal. So we can hit that it would have ended at 8:11 because it was 2 minutes after it was originally assessed at 10:11. So you can hit end, and that's no longer in the queue. We might be in a situation now where the first minor to number 16 has ended because we're past 5:09. Again, we can put that has ended, but we know that we have one that's still active and it's ending at 3:09. But perhaps that home team scores a goal. So a goal scored with a couple of assists, and it scored in the first period, and it scored at 350. And we know that that is a power play goal because there is a minor penalty showing on the clock. And by clicking power play goal, it'll ask if it ends this penalty. And because it is the minor penalty, that player will come out of the box. We'll be pulling that off the board. We know that we can do that. And instead of the game or the penalty ending at 309 statistically, by clicking this, it'll automatically now default to the new time we've identified that this goal was scored. So you're actually doing multiple functions now all in one chronological order. You don't have to go in and adjust that penalty to the time. It does it automatically because it's linked to the scoring of this goal. So now you'll see that that is no longer in the queue.
So the only other thing was we had to check from behind,
yes,
or
and the
coincidentals.
No, so those are good examples again. So we'll go back into another penalty situation, and we'll have the situation where we need somebody to serve. So again, you identify the player first, and what that does is it defaults them to be for the same player to serve the penalty. But if we know that now that that player has been ejected, we'll pick the player that's coming in to serve the penalty. The player highlighted in yellow, the player receiving the penalty, is the one that's getting ejected from the game. But the player in white, the secondary player we've selected, is the player who's on the ice at the time of the infraction that's serving the penalty that makes that team shorthanded. We know that this is a check from behind. We did that in the demo. It could even be a cross-checking penalty where it's a major, because that still requires somebody to serve. So that person serving will serve the time penalty, while the game misconduct is served by the player who originally received the penalty. But for the purpose of the demo, for consistency to what we did before, we'll choose the minor penalty for checking from behind. It automatically recognizes that that particular infraction is unique, that it also comes with the game misconduct. That's why we had that player served. And you can see the checking from behind minor was assessed to 9, but it's being served by 3. But the associated game misconduct is being served and was assessed to number 9, and they're out of the game. We'll put in the appropriate time that penalty may have occurred, 150 of the first period or whatever time it occurred, and then that'll add into the queue. And again, you'll notice that they have their own individual line items. So now we know we have a penalty in place, and that because it happened in the first period, it automatically queues that penalty carries over to the second period, and it should end at 1950. So we know that that's in the queue. The other one that we had the example of was that coincidental penalty situation. So we're now in the second period. We have a player who's going to serve their own penalty. It doesn't go on the clock because it's coincidental, but they might have had a boarding minor penalty, and it occurred in the second period at the 1850 mark. We save that. We have another penalty to the other team by number 4, served by them because it's coincidental. It's the same duration. The boarding penalty was maybe retaliated with a rough for a minor penalty, and it's at the same time. Again, it defaults to your last action, so you know that they're at the same time and they're coincidentals. And those will end at the same time, but they will. The penalty will end. So this is one thing that we didn't bring up, maybe with the original example of the coincidental. The coincidental penalties end at 1650. The players don't come out of the box at that time. They wait for a stoppage after that time has expired because their teams aren't actually shorthanded in the coincidental scenario. But for statistical purposes, it still ends at 1650. So if that first stoppage happens to be at the 14-minute mark, because we had a long sequence of play, it doesn't mean we have to go in and change that penalty ended at 14 minutes. It actually ends 2 minutes after it was originally assessed. It's just it doesn't affect the player power on the ice. So it's still accurate that it would have ended at 1650. Was there any other examples we wanted to run through?
No, I think that sort of covers the base examples. On a regular game sheet, you put on what time they went back on. So you're saying we don't do that anymore?
No, and I think that in a regular paper game sheet, I think that was a misconception anyways.
Okay.
When they go on the ice is really when they physically enter back into the game during live play because they were shorthanded. When they go back on isn't a relevant component to a coincidental penalty. Okay. That more comes into play, honestly, probably when we hit midget games and we start seeing minor penalty after minor penalty after minor penalty start stacking up. But again, this system sort of self-calculates all of that. So is there any questions as people have gone through this process, maybe in their own demos, on how to enter anything? Or Tommy, is there any comments you might want to make?
Yeah, so if you missed a penalty or a game and you've already, like in the past, you can still go in and enter at time. Sean, I could just show an example of, say, a goal, for example.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's say there was a goal that we forgot to document. So 2 scoring from 3. And even though it defaults us to the second period, maybe it occurred in the first period. It'll note that this is in the past, which is fine, but we can put in the actual time that may have occurred. Maybe it was 16 minutes. Is this what you're referring to?
Yeah, and that warning is just there to give you a heads up. Say, hey, you might have entered the wrong time or something, or just to make you aware, but it's not preventing you from doing anything because you might be right. So
right, yeah, exactly. Like we may have you may have 2 consecutive goals that happen really fast to each other, and you've really just entered the one that just happened. You're like, oh, I forgot to put in the one that happened just before. And I know that Anne's got a little cheat sheet that she's used or has.
Well, we got that from Okanagan Mainline, and I've sent it out to everybody. And actually, all the team managers from Pee Wee, Bantam, and Midget have also been sent this. And most people take pieces of paper in with them. And this is just a little more advanced so that you can write anything down that, as things sometimes happen in multiples, you can write it down and then you can go after the play started and do the entry onto the electronic part.
Yeah, and I've score kept quite a few games using this platform. Everything from where I'm doing both the clock and the score sheet to where I'm just doing the score sheet. In both scenarios, it's good to have at the very least a scrap of paper where something might happen really fast. You might be having to stop the time or actually punch the time up onto the clock, and you're going to get to, once play resumes again, you'll get to entering it in the sheet, and you can quickly just note things. The sheet that Anne's given you allows you to document it in a lot more organized fashion, so it really cues you to all of those points.
So we have a question. Too many men assigned to a player or someone on the team, so let's add a penalty.
That's a good example. So let's start with it's a bench penalty, perhaps. So too many players on the ice. That's essentially a team penalty, so a coach penalty. So it's being assessed to the coach, but the coach isn't going to be the one who serves it. And you'll notice that, first of all, the coaches have the bit of a unique icon, so you know that it's the coach. One, it gives the initials of the name rather than a number, so that first identifies them as a non-playing participant. And then the other component is that it automatically notes that somebody has to serve it when a non-playing participant is selected. So whether this is a bench minor, say the coach actually takes a penalty for arguing a call, or the team gets the penalty for too many players on the ice, it automatically asks you to have somebody serve. So that's when you can then indicate the player that's going to go in and serve that penalty. So it could be a bench minor. It could be alphabetically too many players on the ice, which is the minor penalty. Lots of different options. But anyways, you go ahead and add that at the appropriate time in which it occurred in the game. And again, it says that it's basically that bench penalty assigned to the coach or one of the non-playing participants, and the player from the ice that'll actually go into the box to serve that penalty. And that adds to the queue. There's a lot of unique penalties that we may not be familiar with. We're not necessarily going to go through all of them. And there's some that won't get used, but you will notice there are a couple of ones that say junior only. There are certain rules as we're preparing to expand the use of the game sheet. Everything in here is a minor hockey appropriate rule unless it says junior only in that notification. There's very few. Warm-up violation, the jersey tie down. Those are ones that you might want to be aware of. Unsportsmanlike conduct is another one that unfortunately happens often enough. But that's the minor penalty, or in the case of a player, a misconduct and a game misconduct, it can escalate to, or you can choose one of them or multiples. Or in some cases, it's the coach who gets it, who it's a minor or a game misconduct. You have the ability to customize those. There's also harassment of officials, which is a category of unsportsmanlike conduct, but again, that gives you the same options if necessary, because you can receive unsportsmanlike conduct for behavior maybe towards an opponent, opposing player or opposing team official, and in other cases, it's based on harassment actually towards the official. So you can make that specific designation. Another rule that's not common, but people need to be aware of is the game ejection. So game ejection occurs when players receive 3 or more stick infractions within the same game, or they've received 3 or more minor or double minor combination of 3 or more of those infractions under the head contact penalty. They receive a game ejection. That's when you'd be assessing this penalty. You'll notice that nothing pops up as a highlight at the bottom because it's a unique infraction, so it doesn't associate to any of the ones below. The referee will notify you that a player's received their 3rd stick infraction, and you just add the fact that player's been ejected from the game. Those are just sort of some unique ones that you might come across. But for the most part, we're dealing with standard playing rule penalties, the trippings, the slashings, the hookings, the interference, and those kinds of things. And again, they're pretty straightforward. Fighting, automatic game misconduct. Every major penalty in the Hockey Canada rule book comes with an automatic game misconduct. So that's why that function within the game sheet automatically shows the game misconduct. Again, it avoids the need to duly enter things. Because obviously you can imagine that if you had to type in major penalty first and then you had to go back in just to add the game misconduct, it would be time consuming. So the game sheet has been designed in a manner that it accomplishes as many functions as possible in one sort of step. So I'll exit out of this just so we don't add an unnecessary infraction. But I think that mostly covers the in-game function. If there's any questions about in-game function, again, remember you've got the ability to note anything that occurs. If you want to put that a suspended player particularly sat this out, if you're wanting to note that the game ended early, like we showed later on as we exit the game, that it may have ended with 3 minutes left on the time clock. You could put that broken glass or power outage or something crazy that just is not normally documented on the game sheet. You can always add that here. So the game notes is sort of an open field for you to be able to do that. And then the ability to note when a goalie's been switched when they've gone off or on and you just swap them out. And that's mostly it. And then we're at the end game. So if everyone's comfortable, again, you can add as many functions as you want, but we'll do one last review of the end game function. So you don't have to clear the penalties in the queue. They'll automatically assume that they've ended on regular time, but we'll go through this function and knowing that we're at the end of the game, all these penalties came to their natural conclusion. Go ahead.
You should. There's also an edit button there in case you realize there's something wrong with that penalty. You can click on edit and go to that same screen. Yeah, no, that's we had that. I don't have a penalty up now, but and I tried to catch you in time, but
yeah. But then again, you also have the ability to remove something from the game if it was duplicate entry by accident, or if you need to change anything. We've sort of shown how to go into that as well. And then when we're in the end game, if we know that it ended at 0 on the clock of the 3rd period, or again, if you're in a scenario where overtime is required or a shootout was required, we can note that and we hit end game. And we move to the verification stage where the timekeepers will sign, the the referee will sign after they've reviewed that page, and we go to finish. And in the finish stage, again, sending the score sheet to the appropriate people that Anne did a review of already, but you can add multiple email addresses as required. And again, if the referee indicates that they need a copy of the report, again, they can always add theirs, and they'll be sent a copy. And then we're ready to submit the game. When we're at this point and we submit, that, as Ann said, that'll end the game. We can't go back into it from a scorekeeping standpoint. So we need to make sure that when we got to this stage, that we've gone through all the appropriate verifications and review. So I'm going to end this game here, and that's the complete game. So again, feel free through the remainder of the evening to go through that staging process, and if you want to go into the manage team component, logging in with the email address and password created to review how to set up team numbers or team positions and such, you can always go in there. Again, that is updated on that hourly basis that Tommy referred to with that HCR sync. So
also point out that under team management, you also see your reports even if you weren't emailed them.
Right. So maybe I'll.
If you know what the teams are.
So if we're in teams, what was that team that we were just using? Of course, right?
Of course, we were using 2284711.
2284711. So if we have our team,
Oh, not that one.
No, it wasn't that team.
It wasn't? Oh,
no,
dear.
That's okay. I think.
Oh, we were on this one.
Oh, yeah,
I circled it.
22400. 400. There we go. Team. Right, and then we have right here, right?
Yep.
So with that game is complete, and that'll link us to a copy of that game sheet.
And it's the exact same thing that gets emailed out.
Yeah, and that's exactly that. Yeah, what Tommy's saying. This is what gets sent to the recipients for reference to the game sheet. So those of you that are used to having to read game sheets by people with handwriting like mine, you're going to be very relieved at this. You may still not be able to read my signature, but you'll be able to see clearly the number, the score, the assists, the appropriate times, the spelling of player names, the slew footing action, that it's actually a slew foot, the associated game misconduct. Like, it's so much more clear. I deal with the discipline task groups all over the province, and I'll tell you, the districts that don't have electronic game sheets right now, they hate they hate us because they can't read game sheets, and all the districts that have had these game incident reports that have to update associations on players that might be receiving suspension love the fact that there's an electronic version here that they can simply reference to a game report. So I think that mostly covers it. On the BC Hockey website, again, we have an e-game sheet tab. What this does is it links you. This link actually takes you to the production site where you go into the management. So this is different than the one that Ann distributed that you've been demoing. But when we go into real games, that's your quick reference right away. We also have other resources, electronic game sheet instructions, which is, oops, the other, where is that tab? I lost it now. Sorry, I got so many tabs going. I'm going to close some of these. There we go, it's the landing page. So it gives you some basic instructions on the steps and the processes that we've reviewed today, which as leads for your associations or teams, these are good resources for people that might be one-time users for the entering the game itself, which is the first stage. A good reminder for you as team management and roster management. We also have links to 4 instructional videos on a YouTube playlist page that walks you through these processes, right from registering your team, which most people have done at this point, managing your team with the numbers, signing your e-game sheet, and then the scorekeeping app itself, and then a platform for frequently asked questions and such. Ann and Dave will be your first point of contact, again, if you have any issues with particulars to the Vancouver Island schedule and setup. And then I'll be their next point resource as I deal with all the districts, in case we come across something that maybe isn't answerable at the district level yet, we might be able to find a solution there. And then if it's something that's an overall function, I'll be able to take that, and BC Hockey will be able to take that to high sport for further investigation if we come across something we just haven't seen yet.
And I would say for tonight, if you still have questions ongoing that you think of after we log out of this, please send them to me, and I will try and get to them in a timely manner to let you know what the answers are. We're hoping that as a result of this, that a lot of teams will feel comfortable starting this weekend to try the electronic game sheet. If you're going to try it, make sure you take a paper game sheet with you, just in the event that things go terribly wrong, and make sure you have your cheat sheets with you just so that you've got a backup to everything. The other thing that I have noted in some time boxes, your scorekeeper is also your music person and sometimes your timekeeper. For the first little while, at least, until you start to really feel comfortable with this, whoever's going to do this electronic game sheet should not be doing anything else.
No, that's good advice. Again, a lot of this is repetition and just getting used to the function. It's very intuitive. High Sports created a very interactive data or platform for you to work with. And it's just a bit of a change to what we're used to seeing in the written format. But I know administratively, for sure, this is a huge step in a much more productive direction. And honestly, it's a lot better to interact with than having to scratch things out or white things out on 4 copies of a paper sheet and then hand them all in and all of that kind of stuff. So all those benefits are good. I know I spoke with a lot of people when we first introduced this concept at the VIAHA meetings in the summer, and there's a lot of excitement around it, and we're just looking forward to being able to roll this out into gameplay and hear the feedback from everybody.
I should also point out that I'm very open to feedback. If you have any issues with it, if you have any concerns or anything, that should be addressed. Feel free to bring it up to Anne, and we'll be in contact with her so we can, continuously improve the application, because really this is to make your lives easier, not to be a hindrance. So
yeah, High Sport's been a really great partner with us. Honestly, to Tommy's probably chagrin at times, almost everything here is not in its original version, because we've been able to go to them and customize what we need for functionality. And the ability to work directly with the developer has been important, and that's really come from feedback from in the field and users. I mean, we benefit a lot at this stage from Omaha, that used it all last year, and even Pacific Coast that's been using it now in our own BC Hockey programming to vet through some of these through some of the challenges as we go. But the ability to work directly with the developers is very good, and that's just due to feedback from the users. So anything that you've got for feedback, we definitely want to hear.
yeah, last season was definitely very different, and it's come a long way since. And even today, it's under active development, and there's a lot of changes coming downstream very soon. So.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Tommy for joining us from High Sport. He's an extremely valuable resource to us, and he lives on a computer because he answers us immediately. So we don't want to take up too much more of his time, because I know it's quite a bit later where he lives compared to where we are. And appreciate Anne coming in and sort of working with Dave Beattie on leading the rollout of this for Vancouver Island. And we look forward to hearing how things go in the field. So again, if there's any questions, let us know, and we'll hopefully have everybody prepared.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Anne.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Tommy.
As everyone logs off, again, the second half of this was recorded, so we'll work on getting that recording. And we should, by some point tomorrow, have something available to share for those of your group that weren't able to join us today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.